birds sang louder and louder. At last the sun came up, bewilderingly bright. Sylvia could see the white sails of ships out at sea, and the clouds that were purple and rose-colored and yellow at first began to fade away. Where was the white heron's nest in the sea of green branches? And was this wonderful sight and pageant of the world the only reward for having climbed to such a giddy height? Now look down again, Sylvia, where the green marsh is set among the shining branches and dark hemlocks. There where you saw the white heron once, you will see him again. Look, look, a white spot of him, like a single floating feather, comes up from the dead hemlock and grows larger and rises and comes close at last and goes by the landmark pine with steady sweep of wing and outstretched slender neck and crested head. And wait, wait, do not move a foot or a finger, little girl. Do not set an arrow of light in consciousness from your too eager eyes. For the heron has perched on a pine bough not far beyond yours, and cries back to his mate on the nest and plumes his feathers for the new day. Well, that's some beautiful writing, obviously, and it's also remarkable for so many ways. I'm sort of delighted with that passage because as a creative writer, it breaks almost every rule you learn about what not to do in a short story. I also am fascinated by the way it announces a moment in the text that really defies easy compartmentalization. We're talking about Sarah On Jewett, and hello 423 and 523 students. And as part of this group of dangerous women that we've been looking at this week, and what I find notable in these writers and exciting about these writers, and indeed all really great writers, is this difficulty about classification. Oftentimes scholars and teachers want to be able to tell you, okay, this writer is a naturalist, this writer is a realist, this writer is romantic, this writer is a modernist, and here are all the rules of each one of those genres, and here's where we can find them. But if you're paying attention to good literature, nothing is easily classifiable, because none of these writers are worried about being a naturalist or a romantic or even a transcendentalist. They are responding and reacting to their worlds. They're trying to tell a true story. And so their work, if it's any good, will defy such classifications. And indeed, that's what makes it interesting and compelling. So what we can see in Sarah On Jewett's The White Heron is a really kind of revolutionary and rebellious text. It even rebels against itself in some ways. Getting back to the writerly aspects of this, you'll notice that section breaks the point of view and actually is almost postmodern in the way it kind of suddenly, in the way sort of you're watching The Office and there are moments where this is supposed to be a documentary, and it reminds you of that, where you have these interviews with the characters in the middle of the story. That moment of looking at the camera and speaking directly to the audience is a very postmodern moment, where it announces, hey, I'm aware that this is a story, by the way, and I'm going to make you think about the fact that it's a story right now, and that I know you're a reader out there, and I'm the author, and I'm creating this, and I'm talking to the characters as if I'm some sort of god. It's a really odd moment in the story, and one that most creative writing teachers would cross out at this point, and put a little mark in the margin saying, don't do this, you can't do this, you've disrupted your text. But it's an important one, and the author is calling attention to this moment. Backing up. On first blush, this looks actually like a very romantic story. In fact, Sylvia and her grandmother would fit perfectly in a moment in a poem on lyrical ballads by Coleridge and Wordsworth. They're in the woods, they're disconnected from society, they're in a state of innocence, almost a bower-like place. And then you have this arrival of a hunter, sort of the voice of evil. I would be careful about characterizing this man as a hunter, though, because we learn a little bit later that he's not a hunter. He's not hunting so that he can sustain himself. He's also not hunting for sport. He's an ornithologist, in other words, a man of science, someone who probably would have called himself a naturalist, someone and who wants to study nature and understand it by, well, shooting it, stuffing it, and hanging it on a wall, collecting it. Where I grew up, we had the Audubon Sanctuary, actually, where you could go and it was a sanctuary for birds, but you could also go into this large building where you'd see all of these stuffed birds, killed-in stuffed birds that had been classified by Audubon, who is very much out of the 19th century sort of naturalist worldview. So that's part of what's going on. But also, the story is clearly a critique of that worldview, a critique of anyone who would value things for, well, its monetary value, which is why you have that sort of almost Judas moment of offering Sylvia money to sort of to reveal where this bird is. To me, that's very biblical. And she has this choice to make. Do I take the coins that this person is offering, which actually be incredibly meaningful to her and her grandmother, who seem to be in a state of relative poverty. But again, the author is making us ask this question: are they actually in poverty, or actually are they in a condition of relative wealth? Especially Sylvia. That climbing up the tree seems to also speak to transcendentalism and Whitman ideas that one can, through nature, rise above one's fellow man. So you're looking down in the town, down on commerce, and you are at a level, an eye level, with the birds. And it's important that the bird is speaking to his mate. In the hands of this writer, it becomes very clear that nature is fecund, it's fertile, and it's often female, whereas science is male, aggressive, and rational. I don't think anybody would question whose side you're on when you're reading this story, and that's what's fascinating about it. It's both naturalistic, obviously, in its careful depiction of nature and its aspect, romantic in the way it imagines, even though it's sort of in an innocent way, animals sort of speaking and thinking like human beings, and it's transcendental in its seeking to sort of rise above these everyday corruptive influences of society. It's even, in a sense, pre-modern in the way that it sort of questions these gender roles and gender identities and questions sort of masculine authority within the text. These are all of the things you want to be thinking about. Everything can be seen as symbolic of this sort of struggle for ascendancy of philosophical ideas, and seems to be actually manipulating us to push us on one side of that, which certainly is not in favor of the ornithologist. So what I want you to be really looking at in these texts by these dangerous women is, what are they questioning? What are these assumptions that they are sort of asking us to reconsider? And don't look for how they fit into a box. Look for how they're constantly trying to break out of the box, because women in the 19th century are in quite a box. And even in the Victorian way that they're forced to dress for the time period, the sexual mores, the rules around marriage, where a woman, the minute she gets married, basically loses all of her property and agency to her husband. You'll be very angry, for example, and we'll talk more about this in a couple of days, with Kate Chopin's A Storm. Most of my students are very angry with the wife in The Storm, and even a little bit angry with the wife in The Story of an Hour. But you need to remember the context in which this place is. It's a radical story, and it's making us question these ideas of what happens, what is a woman's role in society? What is a woman's role in marriage? And are these institutions inherently oppressive? And maybe they would be better off on their own, separate from them. One of an acquaintance of mine in college who I sort of viscerally disliked started a men's magazine. The title of the men's magazine was this awful man. Adam was doing just fine by himself. It's very clear that that's been inverted here. Sylvia and her grandmother were clearly doing better by themselves before this ornithologist showed up. And what is that actually saying to us? All right, so hopefully you enjoy the story, and this gives you a kind of a way of taking a look at it. I look forward to your discussion board due Wednesday. Many of you have not signed up for an appointment, and I keep sending you out sending you reminders. You are required to sign up for an appointment with me, regardless of how you did on the essay. In fact, in many cases, I won't let you know how you're doing on your paper until you come and until you make that appointment with me. And sign up, because I'm not simply going to send you a bunch of comments and tell you to check off a series of boxes. I want to talk to you about what you're trying to do and try to make sure that we achieve that. So it's a negotiation between what my expectations are and what you really are trying to say and what you are interested in for this text. So make sure you sign up for that appointment, or you just won't know how you're doing. All right, I hope you're all doing well. I hope you're enjoying the readings and working on those term papers. More soon.